She's just a waitress, Xander. She probably can't even spell caviar, let alone afford it. Those were the words that sealed Tiffany's fate, spoken lightly, carelessly, as if the quiet girl in the apron were invisible, as if she were nobody, someone to humiliate for sport while her billionaire boyfriend looked away. Tiffany believed money bought class, bought silence, bought immunity. She was wrong. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that the nobody pouring her water wasn't just a waitress at all. She was carrying a secret powerful enough to destroy the biggest deal of Barrett's life. And when that truth surfaced not in English, but in commanding Arabic, the silence that followed would be deafening. You might want to sit down for this one. This is the story of how a billionaire's girlfriend pushed the wrong woman too far. Outside, the rain in Manhattan was not the romantic kind from the movies. It was sharp and aggressive, stinging as it lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Le Coup, one of Soho's most exclusive French restaurants. Inside, however, the storm didn't exist. Inside, the air carried the rich scent of brown butter, expensive perfume, and old money. Andrew Jenkins adjusted her apron in the reflection of the brass espresso machine and barely recognized the exhausted woman staring back. At 26, she carried a bone-deep fatigue that came from juggling a full-time PhD workload at Columbia University with 40-hour weeks, spent balancing trays of heavy porcelain. Her sharp hazel eyes, usually alert and intelligent, were rimmed red from too little sleep. "Table floor is yours." Andrew, Henry, the floor manager, snapped as he swept past her with terrifying swiftness. Henry was the sort of man who believed that a waitress smiling too much was go, and smiling too little was insubordination. "Phoebe. Mr. Amanda, do not mess this up." His guest is difficult. A knot tightened in Andrew's stomach at the name. Barrett Amanda. Everyone in New York knew it, the heir to Amanda & Co., the venture capital firm that seemed to own half the skyline. 32, devastatingly handsome in that effortless, slightly neglected way, and currently splashed across every tabloid thanks to his new girlfriend, Tiffany Dubois. Tiffany, the influencer turned socialite, the kind of woman who treated service staff not like people, but like malfunctioning appliances. "I've got it," Andrew said softly, smoothing her black skirt. She inhaled deeply. For more hours, that was all. For more hours, and she could return to her tiny apartment in Queens, open her thesis on linguistic nuances in post-Cold War diplomatic relations in the Gulf, and forget that to these people she was nothing more than a servant. She stepped onto the floor where ambient jazz hummed low and steady. Table 4 was the best seat in the house, a semi-private alcove with a view of the open kitchen, intimate yet visible. Barrett Amanda was already there, hunched slightly over his phone, brow furrowed, thumbs moving rapidly. His navy suit likely cost more than her entire student loan debt. Across from him sat Tiffany, striking, undeniably beautiful, platinum blonde hair cascading in loose, perfect waves, wearing a red dress cut aggressively low. She scanned the room with an expression balanced delicately between boredom and disdain. Andrew approached, the weight of the water pitcher steady in her hand. "Good evening," she said in her practiced, neutral tone. "Welcome to La Cuckoo. My name is Andrew, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Would you like to start with?" Tiffany didn't look up. She lifted her fork, examining the tines as though checking for rust. "Sparkling," she interrupted with a dismissive wave, "and make sure it's chilled. The last time we were here, the water was lukewarm. It was disgusting." Barrett glanced up, startled, gray eyes flashing with brief embarrassment. "Tiffany, please. The water was fine last time. It was tap water." "Xander," she snapped, finally looking at Andrew. Her gaze traveled slowly over Andrew's uniform, pausing at a tiny fray in her collar, and a smirk curved her lips. "Make sure this one understands. San Pellegrino, not tap." "Of course, Madam," Andrew replied, tightening her grip on the pitcher. "I'll bring that right out. And tell the chef," Tiffany continued loudly enough for neighboring tables to hear, "but if the scallops are rubbery again, I'm sending them back. I don't care if he is Michelin-starred. I will convey the message," Andrew said evenly. As she turned away, Tiffany's voice dropped into a loud whisper. "Honestly, Xander, look at her shoes. Do they not pay them enough to buy polish? It's depressing. It ruins my appetite." Andrew paused only for a fraction of a second, her spine stiffening. She glanced down at her black non-slip work shoes, scuffed, worn. She had walked 6 miles in them the day before to save subway fare. She swallowed her pride, the lump sharpened her throat, and kept walking. She needed the tip. She needed to pay tuition. She couldn't afford a scene. Not yet. By 8 p.m. the dinner rush was in full swing, the restaurant alive with clinking crystal and hushed discussions of mergers and Hampton's rentals. At table 4, tension simmered. Barrett seemed distracted, checking his watch repeatedly, his leg bouncing under the table, barely touching his appetizer. Xander, you're not listening to me, Tiffany whined, stabbing at her tuna top. I said the gala in Milan is next week. I need the jet. Commercial is just it's full of germs. Tiffany said it with a shudder of disgust, as if the very idea offended her existence. I told you, Tiff, Barrett replied, rubbing his temples like a man already exhausted by a battle he hadn't won. The jet is in maintenance, and I have that meeting tonight. The one I told you about, the Al Hassan deal. Oh, the oil people, Tiffany said, rolling her eyes so dramatically it was almost theatrical. Boring. It's not boring. It's a $2 billion infrastructure deal in Riyadh, Barrett answered, his voice tightening with pressure. Mr. Al Hassan is flying in tonight. He might even stop by here. It's crucial that we make a good impression if he does. Andrew stood beside them refilling their wine glasses. 2015 Chateau Mott. $800 a bottle, moving with the quiet precision of someone who had mastered invisibility. She poured evenly, silently, like a ghost. Well, I hope he speaks English. Tiffany laughed, taking a long gulp of the wine. I hate having to listen to that guttural noise. It sounds like they're choking. Andrew's hand froze for a fraction of a second. The deep red liquid trembled inside the bottle's neck. Barrett looked physically pained. Tiffany, keep your voice down. These are sophisticated people. They are highly educated. Whatever, she dismissed, waving him off. And then her eyes landed on Andrew. She slowly turned in her chair, narrowing her gaze. Excuse me. Yes, madam, Andrew asked evenly. You poured his more than mine, Tiffany accused, pointing sharply at the glasses. Are you trying to say he needs it more, or are you just incompetent? The accusation hung absurdly in the air. The glasses were perfectly even. Andrew had been pouring wine for 4 years. She could measure an ounce by weight alone. I apologize if it seems that way, Andrew said calmly. I can top yours off now. Tiffany covered her glass with her manicured hand. Now it's tainted. You were hovering. It's creepy. Go away. Barrett sighed and reached for his wallet as if money might dissolve humiliation. Tiffany, stop. She's doing her job. She's doing a bad job. Look at her. Tiffany gestured vaguely toward Andrew's face. She looks like she hasn't slept in a week. It's unhygienic. I don't want a zombie handling my food. Heat climbed Andrew's neck, burning behind her ears. It wasn't only the insult, it was the absence of basic humanity. She looked at Barrett, waiting for him to step in, to act like the gentleman the tabloids portrayed. He did look at her. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the scuffed shoes beneath the table, the faint tremor in her hands. For a moment there was sympathy there. Then he glanced back at Tiffany and chose the path of least resistance. Just give us a moment, please, Barrett said quietly to Andrew, avoiding her gaze. Certainly, sir, she whispered, retreating to the service station, her heart pounding so hard it felt audible. Rough table. Marco, the sommelier, asked gently as he polished a decanter. She's a nightmare, Andrew murmured, leaning against the counter. She thinks because she has a cardia bracelet, she can treat people like dirt. Marco shrugged. She's insecure. Barrett is old money. She's new money. She has to scream to be heard. Just ignore it. Take their money and run. I'm trying, Andrew said softly. But he mentioned the Al Hassan deal. Marco paused mid the Saudi infrastructure project. Andrew nodded. Barrett is terrified. He's waiting for a Mr. Al Hassan. Marco let out a low whistle. Big stakes. If that girl opens her mouth in front of a Saudi royal, game over. Andrew glanced back at the table. Tiffany had switched to taking selfies with the flash on, blinding diners at the adjacent table. Barrett sat with his head in his hands, but Andrew knew something they didn't. Through her PhD research, she knew exactly who the Al Hassan family was. Traditionally, intensely private, people who valued respect above everything else. They despised ostentatious wealth and rudeness. If Tiffany behaved like this in front of them, Barrett wouldn't just lose the deal. He would be blacklisted from the region entirely. Andrew checked the reservation tablet. A blocked slot for 9 p.m. under the name It was 8:55. The restaurant door opened, and a gust of rain-scented wind slipped inside. 2 men entered in immaculate Western suits, though Andrew recognized the Savaro bespoke cut immediately. The older man in front had a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that missed nothing. Omar El, and he was walking directly toward Barrett's table. Henry panicked instantly, scrambling for menus, realizing too late who the real VIP was. But Andrew was already moving. She grabbed a fresh pitcher of water and a basket of warm bread. She would not let Henry bumble this. As she approached, Tiffany's voice cut sharply through the room. Finally, she groaned, glancing toward the door. Is that them? They look so serious. Do I have to bow or something? I'm not bowing to anyone. I'm an American. Tiffany, shut up. Please, Barrett hissed, standing quickly, buttoning his jacket, forcing a polished smile onto his face. Mr. Alhassan, what an honor. Mr. Alhassan stopped at the table without smiling. His gaze moved from Barrett to Tiffany, who remained slouched in her chair, scrolling through her phone, not even attempting to stand. Mr. Amanda Alhassan said, his voice deep, accented, but precise. I hope I am not interrupting your dinner. Not at all. Not at all, Barrett replied, sweat beading faintly at his temple. Please join us. This is my partner, Tiffany. Tiffany glanced up lazily, popped a piece of gum into her mouth, and gave a small wave. Hi. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush a diamond. In golf culture, standing to greet a guestess, especially an elder, was mandatory respect. Tiffany remaining seated was a visible insult. Mr. Alhassan's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not sit. Perhaps this is a bad time. Perhaps this is a bad time, Alhassan said coldly. We can reschedule. Barrett looked as though he might actually collapse on the spot, color draining from his face. No, please sit, Andrew. He snapped his fingers sharply at Andrew, who had been hovering nearby, ready to assist. Chairs now. The sound of his fingers snapping at her like she was a dog cracked something fragile inside her chest. Still, she moved. She brought the chairs. She set the table for the new guests with steady hands. She poured the water carefully, and then the accident happened. As Andrew reached across to place a napkin in front of Mr. Alhassan, Tiffany shifted abruptly in her seat, flinging her arm back to adjust her hair. Her elbow slammed hard into Andrew's arm. The pitcher of ice water tipped. A cascade of freezing liquid spilled directly into Tiffany's lap and splashed across the sleeve of Mr. Alhassan's pristine suit. The restaurant fell into stunned silence. Tiffany screamed a high-pitched, glass-shattering shriek as she jumped to her feet, her red dress drenched. You idiot, Tiffany shouted, shoving Andrew backward. Andrew stumbled, barely catching herself against the edge of the table. I am so sorry. She hit my arm, Andrew stammered. She hit your arm, you clumsy, stupid cow, Tiffany yelled, her face contorting into something vicious. She snatched up a cloth napkin and hurled it into Andrew's face. Look at my dress. This is Valentino. You've ruined it, Tiffany. Stop, Barrett shouted, horrified, before turning immediately to Mr. Alhassan and grabbing a napkin to blot at the man's sleeve. Sir, I am so sorry. She's just clumsy. We'll have her fired immediately. Fired, the word echoed in Andrew's ears. She went completely still. She looked at Barrett, but he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the investor, panic radiating off him, willing to sacrifice her without hesitation to salvage the deal. Get out of my sight, Tiffany hissed, stepping closer to Andrew, looming over her. You are worthless. You serve food because you're too stupid to do anything else. Go back to the kitchen and cry, you little rat. Mr. Alhassan observed the entire scene with open disgust. He brushed Barrett's hand away from his sleeve. His expression made it clear he was ready to leave. The deal was dead. Barrett knew it. Andrew looked at Tiffany, then at Barrett, who still refused to meet her eyes, and something inside her shifted. Her shoulders straightened. Her chin lifted. The exhaustion drained from her features, replaced by something colder, sharper, intelligent. She did not retreat to the kitchen. Instead, she turned toward Mr. Alhassan and spoke. The restaurant was utterly silent except for the steady drumming of rain against the windows. Henry, the manager, hurried over, pale and flustered, clearly intending to drag Andrew away by her apron ties. Barrett continued muttering frantic apologies while dabbing uselessly at the damp fabric. Tiffany trembled with fury, already inhaling to spit another insult, but Andrew raised her hand not timidly, not as a servant but as a quiet command. It was subtle, yet it stopped Henry mid. She met Mr. Alhassan's gaze directly. His expression had hardened into granite. He was preparing to leave, having witnessed enough disrespect to last him a lifetime. Andrew drew a slow breath, steadying herself, and when she spoke, English disappeared from the room. Nan Baton and Alpha, peace be upon you, sir. I beg your pardon. Please. This was an unintentional mistake, but respect is mandatory, and I apologize on behalf of the chaos. The Arabic she spoke was not casual or broken, it was modern standard Arabic delivered in the precise, elevated cadence of a diplomat, the language of news anchors, poets, royalty. The shift in the room was instantaneous. Mr. Alhassan stopped buttoning his jacket. His head lifted sharply. The disgust on his face dissolved into pure shock. He looked at the waitress, at her scuffed shoes, her stained apron, her tired eyes, and heard instead the voice of an educated equal. Barrett froze. staring at Andrew with his mouth slightly open. Andrew. Tiffany blinked in confusion, her expression scrunched in irritation. What is she doing? Is she casting a spell? Stop speaking gibberish. Andrew ignored them both, her eyes never leaving Alhassan's. Mr. Alhassan stepped closer, disregarding the water dripping from his cuff. He answered her in Arabic, his tone probing. Initiatalina Lugamin. You speak the language from where? Andrew inclined her head slightly, a gesture of difference, not submission. I am a PhD candidate at Columbia University, sir. My specialization is in diplomatic relations. Slowly, a smile spread across Alhassan's face, the smile of a man who had found water in a desert. He let out a deep, booming laugh that startled everyone in the stunned restaurant. A scholar, he switched back to English, but he was speaking to Andrew, not Barrett. She is a scholar hiding in an apron. Barrett gave a strained, nervous laugh, scrambling to regain control. Yes, well, our staff is very diverse, but Mr. Alhassan, about the deal. Alhassan lifted one hand, silencing a billionaire with a single gesture. One moment, Mr. Amanda. Then he turned back to Andrew. And what did you say happened with the water? My young friend here, he gestured faintly toward Barrett, says you are clumsy. Andrew briefly glanced at Tiffany, whose face was flushed crimson with rage. Tell him, I want you fired, Tiffany screeched. Xander, why are you letting the help talk to him? Andrew returned her gaze to Alhassan and shifted back to English so everyone could understand. Her voice cool and measured, almost academic. Mr. Amanda is trying to be chivalrous, sir. But the truth is, his guest's elbow made contact with my arm while she was adjusting her hair. Andrew demonstrated the motion elegantly. A small controlled sweep of her arm that recreated exactly what had happened. Physics dictated the rest. Alhassan watched the demonstration, then shifted his gaze to Tiffany, taking in her wild gestures, her fury, her gracelessness, before looking back at Andrew's composed, steady posture. I see, Alhassan said. Physics, a very polite way to say carelessness. I didn't touch her, Tiffany lied, though her voice cracked under the weight of the room. Mr. Amanda Alhassan continued, his voice dropping an octave, turning deadly serious. You invited me here to discuss the Riode infrastructure project, a project built on trust, precision, and honor. Yes, absolutely. Barrett nodded vigorously, desperation creeping into his expression. And yet Alhassan gestured lightly toward the wet table. You cannot control your own dinner table. You allow your guest to insult a woman who is clearly her intellectual superior, and then you try to fire the innocent party to save face. This is not honorable. Barrett paled visibly. Sir, I am inclined to leave, Alhassan said, glancing at his watch with finality. I do not do business with men who lack judgment. Barrett looked physically ill. The deal was worth 10 figures. It was the future of his company. If Alhassan walked out, the board would have Barrett's head. Please, Barrett begged, whatever dignity he had left crumbling in front of everyone. Mr. Alhassan, give me a chance. Let's sit, let's eat. I promise no more interruptions. Alhassan hesitated. He glanced toward the door, weighing the insult against the opportunity. Then his eyes moved to Andrew. I will stay, Alhassan said at last. Barrett exhaled shakily, his shoulders sagging in visible relief. Thank you, thank you. On one condition, Alhassan added. Anything. Barrett replied instantly. Alhassan raised a hand and pointed directly at Andrew. She sits with us. The silence that followed was absolute. Excuse me, Tiffany whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. She serves the food. She doesn't eat it. She is the only person at this table I currently respect, Alhassan said calmly as he sat down and smoothed his napkin across his lap. And since my English can be tiring for me after a long flight, and Mr. Amanda does not speak my language, she will act as my translator. Unless you object, Mr. Amanda. It was a trap, beautiful and brutal. If Barrett refused, Alhassan would walk out. If he agreed, he would have to elevate his waitress to equal status in front of his snobbish girlfriend. Barrett looked at Andrew differently now, not as background noise, not as stuff, but as a lifeline. No objection, Barrett croaked. Henry, bring another chair. Henry, who had been hovering in stunned silence, hurried forward and obeyed immediately. He placed the chair at the table. Andrew untied her apron slowly. As she folded the stained white fabric in her hands, she felt a strange sensation like shedding an old skin. Beneath it she wore a simple black work shirt and skirt, but without the apron she looked less like a server and more like a serious young professional. She took her seat beside Alhassan, directly across from Tiffany. Tiffany looked as though she were hallucinating. She gripped her knife tightly, as if considering throwing it. This is a joke. Is this a reality show? Xander, are we being Tiffany, be quiet, Barrett snapped, his voice sharp the first time he had ever raised it at her. Then he turned to Andrew. Andrew, I didn't know you spoke Arabic, you never asked. Andrew replied simply, you usually only ask for the specials. Al-Hassan chuckled softly. Touche, David, the young waiter who had always seemed intimidated by Andrew, approached nervously with fresh water and menus. Now Al-Hassan said, switching to Arabic and leaning back in his chair comfortably. Tell me, Andrew, what do you think of Mr. Amanda's proposal for the solar grid in the Eastern Province? Be honest. Andrew didn't hesitate. She knew the proposal well. She had read about it in the Financial Times during her break. She answered in Arabic, her tone precise. Technically, it is sound. However, his risk assessment for the sandstorms is optimistic, and he underestimates the local tribal zoning laws. He needs a local partner, or the permits will be stuck in bureaucracy for years. Al-Hassan's eyebrows rose in clear surprise. He turned toward Barrett. What did she say? Barrett asked nervously, sweat forming at his collar. Is she translating? Al-Hassan smirked faintly. She says your risk assessment is optimistic. Barrett loosened his tie. We can adjust the margins. She also suggests you are ignorant of the zoning laws, Al-Hassan added, clearly enjoying this. I have a legal team. Barrett protested weakly. Your legal team is in New York, Andrew said calmly in English, her voice measured and authoritative. The zoning laws in Riyadh are based on municipal decrees that aren't digitized. Unless you have someone on the ground in the Dera municipality, you're flying blind. Barrett stared at her in disbelief. How do you know that? My thesis covers urban development in the Gulf Coast 20,110, Andrew replied evenly. I spent 6 months in Riyadh last year on a Fulbright scholarship. I know the city better than your consultants do. Barrett fell silent. He had spent millions on consultants, while the true expert had been refilling his water for half a year. Tiffany couldn't stand it any longer. The attention was no longer on her. She was being ignored. She was supposed to be the star and this waitress was stealing the scene. Okay, enough, Tiffany snapped, slamming her hand down on the table. Who cares about zoning? Look at her hands. Her nails are chipped. It's disgusting that she's at the table. Xander, tell them about the yacht. Tell them about us. Al-Hassan let out a long, weary sigh. He turned toward Andrew and asked in Arabic, does she ever stop talking? Rarely, Andrew replied in Arabic without missing a beat. She is like a radio that cannot be turned off. Al-Hassan laughed loudly once more. Stop it, Tiffany shrieked. Stop speaking that terrorist language. The air seemed to leave the room all at once. Barrett closed his eyes. He knew it was over. You didn't say that. You didn't say that to an Arab investor. You didn't say that in New York City. You didn't say that anywhere. The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke. Al-Hassan stood up slowly, deliberately, and whatever trace of amusement had been on his face vanished completely. What remained was something far more terrifying. Terrorist language, Al-Hassan repeated softly. Tiffany, Barrett whispered, his face drained of color. Get out. What? Tiffany stared at him, confused. Get out, Barrett hissed. Go to the car. Now, but now, Barrett roared, slamming his fist onto the table so hard the silverware jumped. Tiffany recoiled. She had never seen him like that. She glanced at Al-Hassan, who looked capable of destroying Amanda and co. with a single phone call. She looked at Andrew, who regarded her with cool detachment. Tears of humiliation filled Tiffany's eyes. She grabbed her purse and ran from the restaurant, her heels clacking sharply against the floor, the echo of her exit lingering in the silence she left behind. Barrett buried his face in his hands. Mr. Al-Hassan, there are no words. No, Al-Hassan replied coldly. There are no words. The deal is dead, Mr. Amanda. Barrett looked up, desperation raw in his eyes. Please, the company needs this. I need this. You chose your company poorly, Al-Hassan said, gesturing toward the empty chair where Tiffany had been sitting. A man's judgment in private reflects his judgment in business. If you tolerate intolerance in your bed, you will tolerate it in your boardroom. He turned to leave. Wait, Andrew said. Al-Hassan paused and looked back at her. Andrew, don't, Barrett muttered hoarsely. It's over, Mr. Al-Hassan, Andrew continued, rising to her feet. You are a man of logic. You know that Mr. Amanda's solar grid technology is the best in the market. You know his competitors are cheaper, but their tech will fail in the heat. You aren't walking away because of the deal. You're walking away because of the disrespect. Disrespect is a valid reason, Al-Hassan said. It is, Andrew agreed. But Mr. Amanda just exiled the source of that disrespect. He chose the deal over the girl. That shows he can learn. It shows he can prioritize. She stepped slightly closer. And if you sign the deal, I will personally review the zoning contracts for the Dura expansion. I will ensure no permit gets stuck. Al-Hassan studied her carefully, then glanced at Barrett, who was staring at Andrew as if she had descended from the heavens. You would work for him? Al-Hassan asked. After he tried to fire you? I wouldn't work for him, Andrew said calmly, shifting her gaze to Barrett. I would work as an independent consultant, and my fee would be substantial. Al-Hassan's smile returned. How substantial? Enough to pay off my student loans. Tonight, Al-Hassan laughed deeply and clapped his hands together. Mr. Amanda, you are the luckiest fool I have ever met. He sat back down. Sit, Andrew. Let us negotiate your fee, Mr. Amanda. Order the wine. And this time, try not to spill it. Barrett looked at Andrew, really looked at her, the woman he had ignored for months. Thank you, he mouthed silently. Andrew did not smile. She sat, picked up the menu, and prepared to close the biggest deal of her life. But the night was not over, and Tiffany was not the kind of girl who went home quietly to cry. She was the kind who called the paparazzi. Outside the window, a camera flash burst. Inside the warm golden glow of Lake Cuckoo, the atmosphere shifted from battlefield to boardroom. Dinner plates disappeared, replaced by a silver pot of mint tea Andrew had ordered, prepared precisely to Mr. Al-Hassan's taste with fresh leaves she had personally retrieved from the kitchen. Barrett Amanda watched Andrew Jenkins across the table, disoriented. An hour earlier she had been the invisible girl refilling his water glass. Now she dissected the geopolitical implications of his solar grid expansion with surgical precision. The initial layout for the grid and dam is flawed, Andrew said, tracing a line across the blueprint Barrett had opened on his tablet. You've placed the primary storage units near the coastal industrial zone. The humidity there will corrode the capacitors within 18 months. You need to move them inland here, near the plateau. Mr. Al-Hassan nodded slowly, stroking his beard. She is correct, Amanda. My engineers said the same thing last week. You did not listen to them. Perhaps you will listen to her. Barrett felt heat rise to his cheeks. I will have the team redraw the schematics immediately. Good, Al-Hassan replied, leaning back, eyes glinting. Now, regarding the matter of our new consultant, Barrett turned to Andrew. He had expected her to request a few $1,000s, perhaps a semester's tuition. Andrew, Barrett said seriously, I want to hire you as a consultant for the duration of this project. Name your price. Andrew did not blink. Her hands rested folded on the white tablecloth. She glanced briefly at her scuffed shoes beneath the table, then up at the man who had overlooked her existence for months. My price, she began steadily, is a retainer of $250,000 plus a 1.5% commission on the finalized contract value upon signing. Barrett nearly choked on his tea. 250. Andrew, that's $250,000. That's a partner-level fee at a top firm, and I just saved a $2 billion deal, Andrew replied evenly. 1.5% of $2 billion is $30 million, Barrett, but I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a commission on the finalized contract, which protects you if the deal falls through. It's a risk-sharing model. It's fair. She paused deliberately, then delivered the kill shot. Or you can go back to relying on Tiffany's advice. I hear she has strong opinions on private jets. Mr. Al-Hassan threw his head back and laughed. She has you, Amanda. Pay the woman. If you don't, I will hire her myself and use her to negotiate against you. Barrett looked at Andrew differently, narrowly looked at her and saw the intelligence, the grit, the undeniable competence. He realized, with a sharp pang of clarity, that he had been dating a decoration while being served by a diamond. Done, Barrett said firmly. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a gold fountain pen, grabbed a linen napkin from the table, and began writing quickly across the fabric. We'll draft a formal contract in the morning. For now, a letter of intent. His handwriting moved fast and decisive. I, Barrett Amanda, hereby retain Andrew Jenkins as lead cultural and strategic consultant. He signed it and slid the napkin across the table. Andrew stared at it for a moment, aware that the ink on that cloth was worth more than her parents had earned in their entire lives. Then she signed her name. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Amanda, she said evenly. Barrett, he corrected softly, his eyes warmer now. Please call me Barrett. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Andrew replied, glancing at her cheap plastic watch. My shift ends in 10 minutes. I still have to tip out the business. Mr. Al-Hassan rose, buttoning his jacket. You will do no such thing. Tonight, you leave through the front door as my guest. They began walking toward the exit together. The restaurant staff watched in stunned awe. Henry, the manager, looked as though he were witnessing a miracle unfold in real time. He actually bowed slightly as Andrew passed. "Good night, Miss Jenkins," Henry stammered. "Good night, Henry," Andrew replied coolly. "Table 6 needs water." They reached the heavy oak doors. Barrett felt triumphant. He had secured the deal, gained a brilliant consultant, and finally rid himself of Tiffany. It felt like the perfect night. He pushed the doors open and the world exploded in white light. Flashbulbs detonated in rapid succession, blinding and relentless. A wall of noise crashed into them, shouting voices, clicking shutters, aggressive shoving. It wasn't one or two photographers. It was a swarm. At least 20 cameras were aimed directly at the doorway, and standing in front of them, posed like a tragic Shakespearean heroine, was Tiffany. She was drenched. She hadn't gone to the car. She had stood in the rain deliberately, letting her makeup run, letting her hair collapse around her shoulders, crafting the perfect image of a discarded, abused victim. "There he is," Tiffany screamed, pointing a manicured finger at Barrett. "The monster." Then she swung her arm toward Andrew. "And there she is, the home wrecker." A reporter from the Daily Mail shoved a microphone into Barrett's face. "Mr. Amanda, is it true you threw your girlfriend out into the rain to have a tryst with the help?" Another voice cut through the Kayasa TMZ stringer. "Mr. Amanda, did you assault Miss Dubois?" Barrett raised his arm to shield his eyes, stunned. "No. Get those cameras out of my face." He chose her. Tiffany wailed to the cameras, tears streaming down her cheek, stares she had summoned with disturbingly convincing skill. I caught them whispering in Arabic, planning, I don't know what. It sounded dangerous, and when I confronted them, he threw me out. He left me on the street." She glared at Andrew with naked venom. "She's not just a waitress. She's a predator. She spilled water on me on purpose to get his attention." Mr. Al-Hassan stepped forward, his security detail attempting to push back the press, but the crowd was too dense. The billionaire investor's expression hardened into fury. This was exactly the kind of chaotic public spectacle the Saudi elite despised. "This is an outrage," Al-Hassan rumbled. "Stay back, sir," Barrett said urgently, stepping protectively in front of him. "I'll handle this." Barrett turned to Tiffany. "Tiffany, stop this insanity immediately." "You are lying, am I?" Tiffany scoffed, stepping closer, fully aware the cameras were devouring every second. "Look at you, walking out with her. You signed something in there, didn't you?" "I saw through the window. Paying her off or paying her for services rendered." The insinuation hung thick and ugly in the rain-soaked air. Reporters gasped audibly. Andrew stood quietly, rain beginning to dampen her hair, soaking into her black shirt. She looked at the mob. She looked at Tiffany, who was smirking faintly behind her theatrical tears. And she understood. Tiffany didn't care about the breakup. She cared about the narrative. If she could paint herself as the victim and Andrew as the villain, she could sell the story for 6 figures and spin it into a reality show. She was monetizing her humiliation. Andrew felt a hand on her shoulder. "Barrett." He looked genuinely terrified, not for himself, but for her. "Andrew, go back inside," he whispered urgently. "They'll tear you apart. I'll call a car around the back." Andrew met his eyes steadily. "If I run, I look guilty. If you stay, they'll destroy you," Barrett insisted. "These people don't care about the truth." Andrew gently stepped out from behind him and walked straight toward the cluster of microphones. "Andrew, no," Barrett shouted after her. She stopped 3 feet from Tiffany. The cameras went wild, click, 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 flashes bursting like lightning. Andrew didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply waited. She stood with such perfect, composed posture that eventually the reporters quieted, curiosity outweighing chaos. "My name," Andrew began, her voice clear and carrying without the need to raise it, "is Andrew Jenkins. My name is Andrew Jenkins. I am a PhD candidate at Columbia University, and I work 30 hours a week at Luku to pay for my education because I do not have a trust fund." She turned her steady gaze toward the TMZ reporter and said that Miss Dubois was asked to leave the restaurant because she referred to the Arabic language, the language of our guest. A dignitarious terrorist noise, and then she physically assaulted me and insulted the waitstaff. Tiffany's eyes went wide. "Liar, you're lying." Andrew reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "I am a student of diplomacy," Andrew said calmly, her voice even, "and in diplomacy we document everything. When Miss Dubois began screaming at the table, I started a voice recording just in case." The color drained from Tiffany's face as Andrew held up the phone. "Would you like me to play the part where she calls Mr. Al-Hassan's culture disgusting? Or the part where she screams at Mr. Amanda to shut up?" The reporters immediately turned their cameras toward Tiffany as the narrative pivoted. Racism and tantrums were juicy, but they weren't the victim story Tiffany was selling. You wouldn't, Tiffany stammered. I would, Andrew replied, or you can get in your car, leave, and issue a public apology to the staff of Luku by morning. If you do that, I delete the file. It was a bluff. Andrew hadn't recorded anything. Phone use was strictly prohibited on the floor of Lake Cuckoo, but Tiffany didn't know the employee handbook. Tiffany only knew fear. She looked at the cameras, then at Andrew's cold, unyielding face, and realized she had picked a fight with someone who was smarter, tougher, and had absolutely nothing to lose. Fine, Tiffany hissed. You can have him, he's boring anyway. She turned and shoved her way through the paparazzi, diving into an Uber that had just pulled up. The reporters swung back to Andrew, hungry for more. Miss Jenkins, is it true you're dating Mr. Amanda? Andrew glanced at Barrett, who was staring at her with a mix of awe and adoration. No, Andrew said into the microphones. I am not dating him. I am his consultant, and we have a solar grid to build. Now, if you'll excuse us, Mr. Amanda has a car to catch, she signaled to Barrett's driver, who had finally maneuvered the black SUV to the curb. Barrett opened the door for Mr. Al-Hassan, then turned to Andrew. Get in, Barrett said. I take the subway, Andrew answered. Not tonight. You don't, Barrett said, grabbing her hand. You're on the payroll now, Andrew. We protect our assets. He pulled her into the warm leather interior of the car, and the door slammed shut, cutting off the noise of the flashing lights. As the car pulled away, Andrew looked out the back window at the rain blurring the city lights, the restaurant fading into the distance. Her life as a waitress was over, but in the quiet of the car, sitting beside a billionaire and a Saudi tycoon, Andrew knew the real drama was just beginning, because Barrett was looking at her not just as a consultant but as the woman who had just saved his life, and Mr. Al-Hassan was watching them both, a small smile playing on his lips. So Al-Hassan broke the silence. The recording, may I hear it? Andrew smiled, leaning her head back against the seat. There is no recording, sir. Al-Hassan burst out laughing while Barrett stared at her wide. You bluffed? Barrett asked. You bluffed the press. You bluffed Tiffany. Poker is a required elective in diplomacy, Andrew said, closing her eyes. Barrett shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. He reached out and gently took her hand, and this time he didn't check his watch. He didn't look at his phone, he just held on. Where to, Mr. Amanda? The driver asked. Barrett looked at Andrew. Where do you live, Andrew? Queens, she said. Atoria to Atoria, Barrett commanded. And take the long way. The heat in Riyadh was not like the humidity of New York City. It was a physical weight, a dry golden blanket pressing down on the tarmac of King Khaled International Airport. But for Barrett Amanda, stepping off his Gulfstream G650, the heat felt like liberation. He adjusted his sunglasses, shielding his eyes from the blinding mid-after afternoon sun. Behind him, Andrew Jenkins descended the aircraft stairs, pausing halfway down to take in the sprawling desert horizon. She looked unrecognizable from the woman who had poured water at Luco 3 months ago. Gone were the scuffed non-slip shoes and the frayed collar. She now wore a tailored linen suit in a soft shade of oatmeal, breathable yet fiercely professional, paired with Italian leather loafers that made a sharp, authoritative click against the metal stairs. Her hair pulled back into an elegant chingan secured with a simple gold pin. It's 110th, Barrett noted, offering her a hand as she reached the bottom step. Most people complain before their feet touched the ground. I told you, Andrew said, ignoring his hand and stepping onto the tarmac with independent grace. I spent a summer in the empty quarter researching Bedouin dialects for my dissertation. This isn't heat, Barrett. This is atmosphere. Barrett smiled, a genuine expression that had become a permanent fixture on his face over the last 90 days. The crushing anxiety that once defined his life, the terror of board meetings, the superficial demands of the social season, the constant noise of Tiffany had evaporated, replaced by a quiet, steel-like confidence. They were ushered into a waiting convoy of armored SUVs. The destination was the Al-Hassan private estate in Deira, the historic heart of the kingdom, where they were to celebrate the official groundbreaking of the Amanda Al-Hassan solar grid. As the convoy sped down the wide palm-lined highways, the interior of the car became a sanctuary of cool air and deliberate silence. Andrew immediately opened her leather portfolio, spreading blueprints and spreadsheets across the console between them with focused precision. The Ministry of Energy approved the secondary substations this morning, Andrew said, her finger tracing a careful line across the schematic. But we have a problem with the logistics provider for the solar panels. The shipping lanes in the Red Sea are congested. I took the liberty of contacting a ground freight alternative through Jeddah. It will cost 2% more, but it guarantees delivery by the deadline. Barrett watched her closely, but he wasn't looking at the charts, he was studying the way her mind worked. She moved like a machine of efficiency, yet there was a human instinct in her calculations that no algorithm could ever replicate. She didn't just solve problems, she anticipated them before they could breathe. "Do you ever stop?" Barrett asked softly. Andrew blinked and looked up. "The contract stipulates that I ensure the project stays on schedule. I'm just doing my job, Barrett." "You're doing the job of 10 people, he countered. "You've saved this company $4 million in logistics alone in the last 6 weeks. 6.2 million, she corrected him instantly. "But who's counting?" Barrett chuckled, shaking his head, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper, an international edition of a British tabloid. "Speaking of counting costs," Barrett said, his tone darkening slightly, "have you seen this?" He slid the paper across the leather seat. Andrew glanced down and saw Tiffany's photo printed on the bottom half of the page, disheveled and caught in the harsh glare of a paparazzi flash outside a Los Angeles nightclub. She wasn't wearing Valentino anymore. Instead, she had on a generic fast fashion dress, and her expression carried desperate anger. The headline read, "Social outlet snubbed, Tiffany Dubose dropped by PR agency after Waitress rant goes viral." "It seems the industry has a long memory," Barrett said. "After you stood up to her that night, 3 other servers from different restaurants in Manhattan came forward. Apparently, throwing drinks and insults was a habit of hers. She's been blacklisted from every major fashion event in New York." Andrew studied the photo for a long, quiet moment, surprised by the strange absence of triumph inside her. She didn't feel happy about Tiffany's downfall, only a sense of correct alignment, as if the world had quietly corrected itself. "She mistook price for value," Andrew said at last, pushing the paper away. "She thought she was important because she was expensive. She never understood that real value is what you bring to the table, not what you wear to it." "I didn't understand that either," Barrett admitted, his voice rough around the edges. "Not until you spilled water on a shake." The car slowed as they approached the massive, ornate iron gates of the Al Hassan Palace, the sun beginning to set and casting long purple shadows across the sand-colored walls. "Barrett," Andrew said, her voice shifting as the professional armor she wore cracked just slightly. "We need to discuss the contract. The groundbreaking is tonight. Technically, my scope of work as a launch consultant concludes once the ribbon is cut." The air inside the car suddenly felt heavier. "You want to discuss your exit strategy?" Barrett asked, his eyes locking onto hers. "I need to know if I should book a commercial flight home tomorrow," Andrew replied, her hands clasping tightly together in her lap. "My semester starts in 3 weeks. I have a thesis to defend." Barrett didn't answer immediately. The car came to a smooth halt in the courtyard, and the doors were opened by attendants dressed in pristine white thess. Barrett stepped out first, buttoning his jacket, then turned and waited for Andrew. As she emerged into the twilight, the warm wind catching the loose strands of her hair, Barrett realized he was looking at the architect of his future. With a subtle wave of his hand, he dismissed the attendants, leaving them alone in the vast, quiet courtyard of the palace. "Andrew," Barrett said, stepping closer, the distance they usually maintained for professional decorum dissolving completely, "I am not renewing your contract." Andrew felt her stomach drop, though she had expected this. She was the help after Ola, highly paid, highly educated help, but still temporary. "I understand," she said, lifting her chin and refusing to let him see the hurt. "I will prepare the handover files by morning." "You aren't listening," Barrett interrupted gently. "I'm not renewing your contract as a consultant because I don't want you to work for me anymore." He reached out and took her hand, his grip firm, warm, and unmistakably possessive. "I want you to be my partner," he said. "In the company, I'm creating a seat on the board for you, Director of International Strategy. You'll have equity, veto power, and your name on the door." Andrew stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. "Barrett, the board will never approve that. I'm a student. The board does what I tell them," Barrett said with newfound authority. "And if they don't, I'll fire them. I learned from the best." Andrew let out a breathless laugh. "Is that the only offer?" Barrett's expression softened as he stepped closer still, his other hand rising to cup her cheek. "No," he whispered. "There is a second offer, but it's personal, and it requires a longer commitment than the first one." "How long?" Andrew asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Ideally, decades," Barrett said. "I don't want to wake up without you, Andrew. I don't want to navigate this world without you," Barrett said softly. You didn't just save the deal that night in New York, you saved me from a life of shallowness. You woke me up. Andrew looked into his gray eyes and, for the first time, saw the vulnerability there, the raw honesty Tiffany had never even bothered to look for. I have a condition, Andrew said, her voice trembling despite her steady posture. Name it, Barrett replied immediately. Anything. The jet, a house in Paris, tuition for every student in your department. No, Andrew smiled, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. No more tap water ever. Barrett threw his head back and laughed, the sound echoing against the palace walls. Done. Only the best for the rest of our lives. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't tentative, and it wasn't for show. It was a seal on a new contract, one written not in ink, but in shared respect and undeniable love. Behind them, the massive wooden doors of the palace opened, and Mr. Al-Hassan stood there flanked by dignitaries. He took in the sight of the billionaire and the scholar standing hand in hand as equals against the backdrop of the Arabian Night. Mr. Al-Hassan smiled thoughtfully, stroking his beard before turning to his aide. Get the good champagne, Al-Hassan murmured, and bring another chair to the head table. The Queen has arrived. Andrew Jenkins slipped her hand more firmly through Barrett's arm, straightened her spine, and walked toward the light, stepping fully into her new life. She had once walked into Luco as a servant, but now she was walking into history as a legend. In a world obsessed with appearances, it is easy to forget that the most powerful person in the room is often the one you overlook. Andrew's story stands as a reminder that dignity, intelligence, and grace are currencies far more valuable than gold or fame. Tiffany had the dress, the followers, and the arrogance, but she lacked the one thing that truly commands respect: humanity. Barrett Amanda learned the hard way that a partner isn't someone who looks good in a photo, but someone who makes you better in real life. Andrew didn't just win the heart of a billionaire. She won the respect of an empire, proving that while you can buy a seat at the table, you still have to earn the right to speak. Wow, what a journey. If Andrew's savage takedown of Tiffany gave you chills, or if you loved seeing Barrett finally wake up and realize what a true partner looks like, smash that like button right now. Have you ever been underestimated just because of your job or how you looked? I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Let's expose the Tiffany's of the world together. And if you want more stories about karma, romance, and underdogs taking over the world, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and remember, never let anyone treat you like tap water when you know you're premium sparkling. See you in the next.